Hey everybody, welcome to episode 15 of the LitRPG Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to LitRPG. I'm Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest news, reviews, and of course, LitRPG author interviews. Before we begin, I want to give a big shout out to our newest Patreon supporters, Scotty Fooch at $1 a month level. Jay Taylor actually upped his pledge to $3 a month. And Aileron Kong, who's the top level supporter at $10 a month. That's an amazing amount of support from everybody who's been listening and watching the podcast for quite a long time. It really does touch me to think that anybody would support this thing I kind of do for fun, to entertain myself so much. So thank you very much for all the support, guys. And of course, everyone in the audience who also supports the podcast in a number of other ways. Thank you, everyone. This week, though, I'll be talking to you about the latest LitRPG news and, of course, LitRPG pre-orders coming up in new releases and reviews. I'll be talking about Strength Build Up, a LitRPG Saga. Also, The Gold Farmer, Treasure Forest. And, of course, Dungeon Crawl, a LitRPG adventure. Now, in LitRPG news, we begin with Aileron Kong's two new book covers. Aileron Kong has actually been redoing a lot of his stuff recently. He plans to produce the entire set of his books for audiobooks. He's having an entirely new narrator redo book number 1, and then he'll do the rest of the books in this series. But apparently this is not going to start until 2017, so that's unfortunate. But additionally, he also has two new book covers for book 1 and 2. The previous 2 are gone. He has 2 new ones, and they look very new and interesting. I personally had no problem with the other book covers, but these are definitely more graphically impressive. They give you a better feel for what the book is about as a fantasy setting kind of thing. Looks really nice, Aileron. Also, Aileron Kong has put out the very first newsletter for LitRPG.com. He owns the domain. I'm always jealous of that. It went out this week, and the podcast and myself have actually been highlighted in that newsletter. So thanks a lot, Aileron, for that LitRPG spotlight. We're going to have a link in the show notes if you want to check out that very first newsletter. And of course, also a link if you want to sign up for Aileron Kong's LitRPG newsletter. And of course, don't forget, our podcast also has a newsletter. I'll put the link in the show notes for that one if you want to sign up for that one too. Okay, also in LitRPG news, we have Omegaverse Book 5, The March of Adonis, is apparently going to come out, later this week. G.R. Cooper has posted on Facebook that it's going to be published on November the 18th. It's a highly anticipated 5th book in the series, and it has a special release date price of 99 cents. It'll also apparently be available on Kindle Unlimited, so there's plenty of ways for you to enjoy this, but if you don't have Kindle Unlimited in the country you're in, 99 cents United States dollar is an amazing price. And apparently as time goes on, it'll gradually increase in price until it hits its normal regular price, which should be about $5, based upon what his book 4 is currently priced at. And if you're not familiar with the Omegaverse series, it's a wonderful series, definitely a fan favorite. And now books 1 through 3 are actually a LitRPG sci-fi space adventure series. Then in book 4, your Cooper flips the script, and it kind of pivots into an even better LitRPG fantasy story, in my opinion. I like book 1 through 3. Book 4, I really love, though. I think the change in setting describes a very flexible world where a lot of different LitRPG stories can be told. I'm always very impressed by J.R. Cooper's ability to pivot in such a way. So I encourage you to go read the books. They're really fun and interesting. Now, if you don't like the sci-fi setting, you can actually start in book 4 and not miss too much. So book 4 and 5, fantasy, 1, 2, 3, sci-fi. Sci-fi LitRPG. We're going to, of course, have the link in our show notes for books 1 through 4 if you want to catch up before book 5 comes out. Also in LitRPG news, the Dark Paladin is up for pre-order. It's written by Vasily Mahenko. This is his new series. Remember, from Vasily Mahenko's point of view, the author of the Way of the Shaman series, he's done with it. He's put all the books out he has in Russia, and this is his new LitRPG series. Dark Paladin, Book 1, called Beginning, is actually up for pre-order on Amazon. It is going to be released later this year on February of 2017. So it's going to be quite a way till we actually get to see it. But Magic Dome Books, the nice folks who are translating it from Russian into English and publishing it here in the United States, have the first chapter up on the website. We'll have a link in our show notes for you guys to read that first chapter. It's pretty good. Additionally, if you can't wait for November 28th for the Vasily Mehenko's next book in the Way the Shaman series, book 4, or if you can't wait till February for the English translation of the Dark Paladin, do not forget that you can actually sign up at Vasily Mehenko's website. And if you subscribe to that particular book, which is usually about $6, the same way, it's about the same price as you would for a pre-order, you can actually get the chapters as they're being translated almost in real time. So that's definitely the best way to get the story as soon as it's being translated into English. But once the actual full English publication is translated, that cuts off. So you have to get that before that is finished. And we'll go ahead and have a link in the show notes for Vasily Mehenko's website and the page, of course, where you can sign up for that service if you wish to do so. Now, also from Magic Dome Books, there's some interesting bit of news. They're actually putting out a LitRPG short story collection. Now, Elron Kong and myself, the last time we did an interview, had the same thought that this would be an amazing way of showing off the works of a number of different authors. And it looks like Magic Dome Books has kind of beat us to the punch, though. They're going to be putting out a series of novellas and short story collection from Russian authors that you probably know and a couple that you might not. It's going to be called You're in Game, LitRPG stories from best-selling authors. Now, the title's a little bit wonky. I think something might have been lost in translation from Russian to English, but it's a nice story collection. You're going to see authors such as Vasily Mehenko from the Way of the Shaman series, Andrei Levanetti from Phantom Server, Michael Antmanov from Perimeter Defense, Alexei Osakuchuch from the Mirror World series, and of course, 2 new authors from Russia that you may not have heard of, but are still writing LitRPG stories. Pavel Kornev, for recently written The Sublime Electricity, and Andrei Novak, who's a new author. I don't know anything that they've written. They're probably more prolific in Russian, but this was going to be the first LitRPG story that they've written and translated into English. The short story collection will be available January 20th, 2017. So there's going to be a little wait, but of course, we'll have a link in the show notes if you want to pre-order it from Amazon. Now, the last bit of LitRPG news is going to be a new Royal Roads Legend interview with our friend Edward Castle. He's also a really good writer, patron supporter for the podcast. We definitely mention that he got a nice interview. So good job there, Edward Castle. He's the best-selling author, novelist of the best-selling story, Unbound Deathlord. If you haven't read it, you should. It's a really fun, interesting story that takes the concept of an undead player character and kind of twists it around. So it's a lot of fun action, good stuff there. Definitely go read it. Has a ton of great reviews on Amazon if you're on the fence in it. But again, congratulations, Edwards, on your success with your story and also on your nice interview. Hopefully we can do some one with you too at some point in the future, man. Okay, on to the list of pre-orders or upcoming LitRPG. We have Homeland Endgame 2 coming out November the 19th. Phantom Castle, Way of the Shaman Book 4. We just talked about that. On November the 28th, it'll be released. The Cadet, LitRPG Squadcom 13, Book 1. This will be out December the 5th. The Way of the Outcast, the 3rd book in the Mirror World series, out December the 19th. Video Game Plotline Tester, The Dark Herbalist, Book 1, by Michael Antonoff. One of the ones I'm definitely looking forward to, but it's not out till January the 3rd, 2017. And of course, we have a couple of new editions. You're in Game, that LitRPG short stories collection. It'll be out on January 20th, 2017. Of course, Vasily Mehenko's newest series, The Beginning, Dark Paladin Book 1, out February the 7th, 2017. On to our new releases and reviews. Okay, new releases interviews. Our first story where I'm going to be talking about is the story called Strength Build, a LitRPG Saga, Book 1, The Fields of Durandor. Now, a lot of these stories have been coming up recently where authors are putting in their titles a LitRPG Saga, a LitRPG adventure, and sometimes they're not, or they're authors who are have written stories in the past and they feel like they kind of qualify, so they're changing their titles on Amazon. This is not one of those. This is definitely a LitRPG story, meets the two qualifications. Unfortunately, there are some issues with it, in my opinion. First, let me describe the story to you. The story is set in a world similar to Dark Souls. It's a dark fantasy VR world. The main character, Nick, is poor. He has an unfaithful, jerky girlfriend and just got the opportunity to be a pixel runner. He gets to play an immersion VR game in front of a live audience, and if he's popular, doing heroic or villainous actions, he can make more money in a couple hours than he's made in last month working. Of course, he chooses a strength build, title of the book, for his character, and we get to see how that works out for him as he faces monsters and other players. Now, here's some issues we have with the story, or I should say I and other readers. The story is super, super short. I believe it's less than 100 pages. Other people have estimated it being less than 50 pages. If that's an issue for you, this is not the story for you, definitely. But it is only 99 cents, and it is available on Kindle Unlimited. So if you are out of things to read, this is not the worst story in the world. I feel like the story has potential, and I'm probably going to pick up the next book in this series. The author does say up front that this is a serial story. So the author intentionally gives you a very short arc in the hopes that you're going to pick up the next and the next and the next book. They're not too expensive, so it's semi-reasonable, especially if you have Kindle Unlimited. This is the kind of thing that, you can burn through in an hour easily. The story in itself is pretty decent. It's nothing amazing. Like I said, it has potential to go in very interesting directions, but the first one feels kind of predictable. He has a strength build. He kind of proves that this is a great way to play this particular game. And that's kind of it. He kills some characters, kills some monsters, gets slightly up your equipment, and the story kind of ends. So it's a fact that it's short. It feels kind of rushed. Those are my complaints about it. But overall, it's a pretty decent story. If I was going to give it on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it a 5. It's average. It's not outstanding, but it's not super bad either. It's just, nothing to write home about. You can, of course, pick up the book if you click on the link in our show notes. Of course, next story, The Gold Farmer, Treasure Forest, Book 1, a LitRPG series. This one just came out. The cover does not do the story justice at all, but I enjoyed the story right off the bat. Now, people have had some issues with this particular story as well, but again, I'll read you the synopsis first. The story is set up very similarly to the manga or the animated series Overlord. If you're familiar with that, you're probably going to like this. But Ken, a VR gold farmer, is accidentally loaded into a different VR world than he's used to. He's sent to a new VR world where it's much harder to level up, and people are paying a premium price for items and gold. The only catch, well, there's permadeath here. So if his character dies, that's it. Cast is right over. Ken has to use his wits, his army of NPCs, and his top-notch gaming skills to make the most of this opportunity. But if he makes a single mistake, he could lose the character he spent so much time playing with forever. Okay. It is 140 pages, currently 99 cents. At a promotional price, its normal price is going to be $2.99. So if you're going to pick it up and you don't have Kindle Unlimited, pick it up now while it's cheap. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, so if you're in that program, if you pay for that subscription, definitely a good read in my opinion. But again, on Amazon, this particular story has a 3 out of 5 story rating as of the recording of this podcast. The most common complaints in the comment section for the story is that the author does not explain enough about character abilities or levels or what they mean relative to this world, that the main character is overpowered, and it's too much like Overlord fan fiction. Now, having said that, as a disclaimer, I actually like the story. I'm a fan of Overlord, the manga and the animated series. I'll have a link in the show notes if you've never seen Overlord. You can catch it on Hulu. You can watch it. It's a good anime. But the theme is basically that an overpowered character who's reached max level in this other VR world is transported to this new fantasy world. along with the non-player characters that he's kind of collected and built up over the course of his gaming career. This story has the same premise. The main character in the Gold Farmer is definitely overpowered. He's like level 120. A lot of the NPCs he has are level 120, like 200 non-player characters. But for me, that doesn't stop it from being an interesting story. Because, of course, of the event of permadeath. Just because he is overpowered doesn't mean he can't lose. Most of the story, he's fighting against characters or monsters that are level 20. So he's definitely going to win in advance. The interesting thing I like about the story is the fact that he doesn't take for granted that he is going to win. He thinks very strategically. He understands that his group of non-player characters and himself is not set up for combat. And so if he runs into other players that have potentially been transported to this world, he has the chance of dying and losing. And so that thought pattern definitely feeds into his reasoning and character choices within the storyline. And I think that's interesting because that's one of the things I didn't like about Overlord, the animated series, was that I never really understood the reasoning behind the character. And that's just a consequence of it being, an animated anime series. You don't have the time to explore those kind of thought processes. And it was interesting to me to get that kind of player reasoning within the story. So I like that about it. You get strategy, you get action. Again, it's not very long, 140 pages, but the author does take the time to explain those things out. So I like that about the series. I enjoyed it. I know that this story isn't for everybody. If you like the animated series Overlord, if you like the manga Overlord, you're probably going to like the story. But if that animated series bothers you for whatever reason, because the character's overpowered and it doesn't feel like he's being challenged at all, you're probably not going to like this either. So that's what I think about the story. And again, that's the Gold Farmer Treasure Forest Book 1 LitRPG series. Okay, time for our last review. Dungeon Crawl, a LitRPG adventure, The Crucible Shard, Book 1. Now, this particular story literally came out hours before I'm recording this particular podcast. It is 201 pages, $3.99, and it's available on Kindle Unlimited. I've had to rush through the story a little bit just to get a feel for whether I like the story or not. But I'll give you the synopsis first, or my particular version of it. In a dystopian future, the best way to get out of the slums is to be a great gamer. Liam's brother, just beat the odds and won a VR gladiatorial tournament. Unfortunately for Liam, that means he has to take his twin brother's place and hack into an illegal underground virtual reality dungeon crawl. It's a risky move meant to impress sponsors and get out of the slums. If Liam can pull it off, he'll be set for life. If he can't, he'll likely be sent to prison. The story is as advertised, though, folks. It's a dungeon crawl, so you can't fault the author for stating it up front. 3 characters start off at level 1, locked in a dungeon, and have to explore and fight their way out. There's monster fighting, exploring, treasure looting. The 3 character classes are a mage, a paladin, and a thief. I feel like that's the beginning of a joke, a LitRPG joke. But once the story actually gets into that fantasy setting world, it's really interesting to me. The setup before that it's not special, but once you get into the fantasy world, it feels very LitRPG-ish. So I really enjoy the story. Again, I haven't finished it all. I'm about halfway through, and that's just a consequence of it coming out the same day that I'm recording this, unfortunately. So I can't tell you if it has a really bad ending or not. But from what I read up to the 50% point, it's really interesting. It's good. It feels like a dungeon crawl. Them having to be really careful at the beginning until they get some decent equipment, and then they can explore some of the different paths within this underground dungeon labyrinth. So it's interesting to me, and I've enjoyed it immensely. So kudos to the author, Skylar Grant, for writing a nice story. Okay, and that's it for the podcast, guys. We're done. The podcast, remember, only exists because of your support, the listeners and viewers. So thank you very much. And I just want to remind you of one of the easiest ways to support the podcast. If you're going to buy any of the books we talked about or pick them up on Kindle Unlimited, click the links we have in their show notes because we get referral revenue from Amazon for just sending you over there. It doesn't cost you anything extra. You click on our links and all the little things you buy, the books, whatever, we get like a couple pennies per one of those purchases you make. So it's not a lot per person, but they all add up when everyone does it. So, and that's the easiest way to support the podcast. There are a ton of other ways to support us, though, including Patreon, which we talked about earlier. And you can find all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. Until I see you guys and talk to you next time, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. See ya.